Thank you very much for joining me. I want to talk to you about ways of improving your memory. We're going to go over some of the benefits of a photographic memory. We're also going to talk about the areas of your brain in particular that affect memory and things that you can do to improve your memory. A photographic memory can help you because it allows you to recall images, sounds, objects, things like that with extreme accuracy, meaning that you're able to picture what it is that you were studying to the point that you can describe it, you can recreate it. Eidetikers, which are those that possess a photographic memory, are able to see a vivid image of something. For example, they'll study maybe a picture, study it for about 30 seconds, and then you can take that picture away and they can still see it. They're able to describe minute details about the image as though it were still there. So obviously, something like that, having that ability, would benefit you because imagine what you could do at work, what you could do in social gatherings, being able to remember someone's name and details about them. These kinds of things are beneficial to us in many, many different ways. So let's look at some of the things in our brain, that the different parts of our brain that handle memory. Certain areas, obviously, are especially important in the formation and the retention of our memory, because in our brain it's divided into several different areas, and each area has specific tasks pretty much. We have the hippocampus, which plays a very, very strong role in processing information as memory. This is a primitive structure that lies deep in the brain. Very important role here because it takes that information and then determines where and how it's going to be stored. Next we have the amygdala. This is an almond-shaped area of the brain that is actually near the hippocampus. It allows us to process emotions, and it helps us also with our memories, because what it does is when there are strong emotions, the amygdala allows kind of an imprint of a memory in our brain that's related to that emotion. So something that can help trigger it. The cerebral cortex. This is the outer layer of the brain. It stores our long-term memory. It actually stores it in several different zones, depending on what kind of processing the information involves. For example, language or sensory input or problem solving, things like that. And then we also have neurons and neurotransmitters. This is the internet of the brain, so to speak. It's the communication highway. The neurons are the connections, and then the neurotransmitters are chemicals in the brain that trigger that communication. Let's take a look at some of the stages that things go through in becoming memory for us. First off, we have the acquisition. This is where new information enters the brain along pathways between neurons in the appropriate area of the brain. Now, the key to encoding information into your memory is concentration. Unless you focus on that information intently, it goes, so to speak, in one ear and out the other. This is why our brain is not overloaded with all the information that we see. Our eyes, our ears, our smell, they all take in a lot of information. Information so vast that supercomputers could not calculate all of that information as quickly as the brain does. Okay, but a lot of the information is completely thrown away because the brain knows, hey, I don't necessarily need to remember this information. But that's why, if you're trying to learn something, you have to pay attention. Then we have consolidation. This is where the information actually gets stored. If you've concentrated well enough on something, the information has been encoded in your brain. The hippocampus sends a signal that it needs to store that information as long-term memory. So that happens more easily if it's related to something that you already know, or if it stimulates an emotional response, for example. So you will find that things that you know a little bit about, it's easier to remember things associated with that because of that relationship that's already there. Then we have the retrieval stage. This is where we actually take advantage of the memory that we have stored. You need to recall some information. Your brain has to activate the same pattern of nerve cells that were used to store it. The more frequently you need that information, the easier it is to retrieve it because we've got healthy nerve cell connections going on there that are used to getting used. Remember the saying, use it or lose it? Very, very true. More true than probably most people realize. So we know that we have to intently concentrate on something to make it become memory, and then it becomes stored, and then to get it back, we want to use it more frequently so that we can get it back and have that recall more available to us so that it's easier to remember. So how can we improve this? Mostly by exercising your brain and going through some positive reinforcement. For example, speak to yourself positively about your memory, how well your memory is going to improve. You want to encourage yourself along these lines. Do things with the brain that it's not used to. Anytime we try to use the brain for something that causes it to think, in other words, not just walking around and picking up a glass of water. Okay, things like a Sudoku game. Also, another thing that is very good for you is close your eyes and do something that you would normally do with your eyes open, like, for example, get dressed in the morning. That stimulates the brain. It causes it to do something new and deal with puzzles and problems that it's not, familiar with. Physical exercise is definitely a way to help your brain be healthy and function at its peak because you're stimulating the brain with an increased flow of blood and oxygen. Involve as many senses as you can. Even if you're a visual type learner, try to get other senses involved in the memory process as well. So, for example, you're visual, right? Well, if you're studying something in a book, try reading out loud because that's going to be the addition of the hearing, the sense of hearing. If you can recite something rhythmically, that's even better. Try to relate information that you are learning about with colors, textures, smells, and tastes are fantastic. The physical act of rewriting information can also help imprint that information in your brain. So everything that we are, like if you hear something, for example, that's why we say write it down. Because it's not so much that you're going to need to have that paper later on, but the fact that you wrote it down is going to help implant that into your brain. Another thing that you can do is rehearse the information that you're trying to learn as frequently as possible. Overlearn the information. So if you learn something today, review it the same day later on, maybe a few hours later, and then even the next day. Do it again. This is a lot more effective than, for example, just trying to cram for an exam at the end, right? Your brain gets tired and it gets overloaded. So if you try to just cram a whole bunch of information in a small space, you're going to forget a lot of it. But if you try to get a handful of information and then a few hours later try to digest that handful again, and then a few hours later again and add a little bit more to it and do that over the process of a couple of days, you're going to find that the information that you learn is much more permanent and you're able to recall it much more easily. Now, I've got a little bit of information for you that I'd like you to take a look at to help improve your memory even further. There's a link on the right where you can find out more information about improving your memory.